The sound of the slap echoed through the VIP room like a gunshot. The music stopped. The laughter died. Everyone in the Sapphire Lounge froze their eyes, locked on the weeping waitress, clutching her cheek, and the man towering over her, Vincenzo Enzo Moretti, the most feared capo in New York City. He called her a thief. He called her trash. He thought he was the predator, and she was the prey. But when she stopped crying, wiped the blood from her lip, and pulled out a burner phone to make one call, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Enzo didn't know it yet, but the moment she whispered the word "Daddy" into the receiver, he hadn't just slapped a waitress. He had just signed his own death warrant. The rain in Manhattan wasn't cleaning the streets. It was just making the grime slicker. Inside the Sapphire Lounge, arguably the most exclusive club in Tribeca, the weather didn't exist. Here the air smelled of expensive mahogany, chilled champagne, and the specific metallic scent of old money mixed with new danger. Clara Evans adjusted her apron, wincing as the fabric rubbed against her lower back. She had been on her feet for 10 hours. Her shift was supposed to end an hour ago. But when the manager, Mr. Henderson, tells you to stay for the VIP guests, you stay. You don't argue. Not when you're 22, drowning in student loans for an art history degree that felt increasingly useless and trying to keep a low profile. Table 4 needs a refill on the scotch, the 30-year-old Macallan. Henderson barked, snapping his fingers near Clara's face. And look alive, Evans. That's the Moretti table. You drop a glass there, and I won't just fire you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Clara nodded, keeping her eyes down. Yes, sir. She knew who sat at table 4. Everyone knew. Vincenzo Enzo Moretti. At 32, he was the youngest Don to ever control the Midtown territories. He was devastatingly handsome, in a way that felt like a warning, sharp jawline, eyes the color of burnt espresso, and a tailored Brioni suit that cost more than Clara's tuition. He didn't just walk into a room. He owned the oxygen within it. Clara picked up the heavy crystal decanter and made her way through the dim lighting. She kept her head down, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. That was her strategy. Be invisible. Be a ghost. When she reached the semi-private booth, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Enzo was flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked like they were carved out of granite. Enzo himself was leaning back, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, looking bored. Pour, he said, not looking at her. Clara moved forward, her hand steady, despite the trembling in her legs. She poured the scotch perfectly, twisting the bottle at the end to prevent a single drop from staining the white tablecloth. Good girl, one of the bodyguards sneered. Clara didn't react. She turned to clear the empty glasses. On the table, sitting atop a pile of leather-bound ledgers Enzo had been reviewing, was a watch. It wasn't just a watch. It was a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime. Platinum. It was worth millions. Enzo had taken it off, presumably because the heavy metal was scratching against the table while he wrote. As Clara reached for a dirty tumbler, her sleeve brushed against the ledger. Watch it! Enzo snapped his hand, shooting out to grab her wrist. His grip was iron. Clara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked up, and for a second her blue eyes met his dark ones. Enzo paused. There was something in her eyes, not the fear he was used to, but a strange, defiant hollowness. I apologize, sir, Clara whispered. Enzo released her wrist, almost as if he'd been burned. Get out of here, you're hovering. Clara retreated quickly, rushing back to the kitchen to breathe. She hated men like him. Arrogant, violent, Men who thought the world was something they could buy or break. She had spent 5 years running from a man exactly like that. 20 minutes later, chaos erupted. Clara was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher when the double door swung open with a violent crash. Mr. Henderson was there, his face pale, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You, out, now!" Clara wiped her hands on her apron. What did I do? Just move." She was marched back out onto the floor. The music had been cut. The lights were turned up blindingly bright. The entire club was silent. Enzo Moretti was standing by table 4. He looked like a demon rising from hell. His suit jacket was off his sleeves, rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. But it was the look on his face that stopped Clara's heart, cold, lethal rage. "Where is it?" Enzo's voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Where is what?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. Enzo took 2 long strides and closed the distance between them. He towered over her, radiating heat and violence. "My watch," he hissed. "I went to the washroom. I came back. It's gone. You were the only one at the table." Clara's eyes widened. "I didn't touch it, I swear." "Liar," Enzo spat. "Empty your pockets." "Sir, please." Mr. Henderson tried to interject, but one of Enzo's bodyguards shoved him back. "I said." Enzo leaned down, his face inches from hers. "Empty your pockets, you little rat." Clara's hands shook as she turned her apron pockets inside out. Nothing but a pen and a few crumpled dollar bills from tips. "Check her locker," Enzo commanded his men. "And strip search her if you have to." "No," Clara shouted, stepping back. "You can't do that. That's illegal." The room gasped. Nobody said no to Vincenzo Moretti. Enzo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Illegal, honey, look around you. I am the law here." The air in the Sapphire Lounge had turned brittle. The patrons, bankers, models, low-level mobsters watched with a mix of horror and fascination. This was the theater of the underworld, and Clara was the sacrifice. "I didn't take your watch," Clara said, her voice gaining a surprising steeliness. "Check the cameras. The cameras in the VIP section are disabled for privacy," Enzo said, stepping closer, crowding her space. "Convenient for you, isn't it? I don't want your money. I don't want your watch. I just want to finish my shift and go home." "You're a thief," Enzo said, his voice rising. "A pathetic, bottom-feeding thief. You saw a chance to pay off your little debts, maybe buy a nice dress so you don't look like a beggar, and you took it." "I'm not a thief," Clara yelled back. Enzo snapped. It happened so fast, nobody saw the wind-up. His hand lashed out the back of his knuckles, connecting hard with Clara's cheekbone. Crack. The sound was sickening. Clara was thrown sideways, crashing into a table of champagne flutes. Glass shattered everywhere. She hit the floor hard, tasting copper. A high-pitched ringing filled her ears. She touched her cheek, and her fingers came away red. The room went deathly silent. Even Enzo looked at his hand for a split second, a flicker of something regret crossing his face, but he buried it instantly under a mask of rage. "Get up," Enzo ordered. "Give it to me, and maybe you leave here with your hands still attached to your wrists." Clara lay on the floor among the broken glass. Her cheek throbbed with a pulse of its own. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She looked at Mr. Henderson. The manager looked away, terrified. No one was going to help her. She was entirely alone. Or was she? She slowly pushed herself up to a sitting position. She looked at Enzo, really looked at him. She saw the bully, the tyrant, the The exact same species of monster she had run away from home to escape. She had changed her name. She had dyed her hair. She had lived in a roach-infested studio apartment in Queens for 4 years just to get away from this life. But they had found her anyway. Not them, but the violence. It always found her. "I'm going to ask you one last time," Enzo said, reaching into his jacket. The glint of a pistol grip was visible to those standing close enough. "Where is the watch?" Clara spat a mouthful of blood onto the polished floor. She reached into her back pocket. The bodyguards tensed hands going to their holsters, but she didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a cheap plastic burner phone. It was an ancient Nokia model, the kind drug dealers and paranoid people used. "Calling the cops," Enzo scoffed. "Go ahead. I own the precinct." "Not the cops," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. She held down the 1 key. It was the only number saved on the phone. She had promised herself she would never dial it. She had sworn she would rather starve than ask him for help. But Enzo Moretti had just slapped her. He had humiliated her. And now he was threatening her life. The line rang once. Click. "Speak," a voice on the other end rumbled. It was a voice that sounded like gravel grinding together. Deep, terrifyingly calm. Clara took a shuddering breath. She looked Enzo dead in the eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. On the other end of the line, 3,000 miles away in a fortress in Sicily, a glass shattered. The silence that followed on the line was heavier than the silence in the club. "Clara!" The voice changed. The ruthlessness vanished, replaced by a desperate, frantic urgency. "Clara, is that you, Tesoro?" "Yes, Daddy." "Where are you? The tracker. It went dead 4 years ago. Where are you?" "I'm at a club in New York." "The Sapphire Lounge," Clara said, her voice breaking. I need help." Enzo frowned. He looked at the waitress. Why did she look so different, suddenly? Her posture had changed. She wasn't cowering anymore. She was sitting amidst the glass like a queen on a broken throne. "Who hurt you?" The voice on the phone dropped an octave. It became demonic. "Clara, who?" "Touched." "You..." Clara looked at Enzo. "A man named Vincenzo Moretti. He hit me, Daddy. He slapped me in the face." Enzo's eyes widened slightly. He recognized the tone shift, but he didn't understand the context. "Moretti." The voice on the phone repeated the name like a curse. "Put him on." "He thinks I stole his watch," Clara said, extending the phone toward Enzo. Enzo stared at the cheap plastic device. He wanted to knock it out of her hand, but something, an instinct honed by years of survival, told him to take it. He snatched the phone. "Who is this?" "If you're her pimp, you should know your girl is a thief." There was a pause. "Listen to me very carefully, boy," the voice on the other end said. It wasn't shouting. It was a whisper that carried the weight of a burying ground. "My name is Alessandro Vitti." Enzo froze. His blood turned to ice. His lungs stopped working. The name hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Alessandro Vitti, the butcher, the capo dei capi, the head of the Sicilian Commission, a man who didn't just run the Mafia. He was the history of violence itself. He was a ghost story. American mobsters told their children to make them behave. I don't believe you." Enzo stammered, his arrogance evaporating instantly. "Vitti has no daughter. His family is in Palermo." "Look at her eyes," Vitti growled. Look at her eyes and tell me she isn't mine." Enzo looked down at Clara. She was standing now, and yes, he saw it. The same ice-blue eyes that were famous in police mugshots from the 90s. The Vitti eyes. "If there is a scratch on her," Vitti continued, his voice trembling with a promised violence that made Enzo's knees weak. "If she has shed a single drop of blood, I will burn New York to the ground to find you, and when I do, I will peel the skin from your bones while you scream for a mercy I do not possess." "Sir, Enzo started, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "My plane leaves in 10 minutes, Vitti said. "You have until I land to fix this. If she is not treated like a goddess when I walk through those doors, the Moretti bloodline ends with you." The line went dead. Enzo slowly lowered the phone. His hand was shaking. He looked at his bodyguards, who looked confused. They hadn't heard the voice. They didn't know that the Reaper was coming. Enzo looked at Clara, the waitress, the girl he had just backhanded. She wiped the blood from her lip again and tilted her head. "He's coming, isn't he?" she asked softly. Enzo swallowed hard. "Yes." "Then," Clara said, brushing glass off her apron, "I suggest you find your watch, because if my father gets here and I'm still the thief, he's going to kill everyone in this room." The silence in the Sapphire Lounge stretched heavy and suffocating. The patrons were still watching, expecting Enzo to pull the trigger or drag the waitress out by her hair. Instead, they watched the most powerful man in Tribeca turn a shade of pale, usually reserved for corpses. Enzo handed the burner phone back to Clara with a hand that trembled visibly. He looked at her cheek, the angry red welt blossoming where his ring had cut the skin. A minute ago it was a mark of his dominance. Now it looked like a target painted on his own forehead. "Luca," Enzo croaked. His voice was dry. His head bodyguard, a man the size of a vending machine, stepped forward. "Boss." "You want me to take her out back?" "No." Enzo screamed, the sound cracking in the air. He spun around, eyes wide and frantic. "Nobody touches her. Nobody even looks at her. Wrong." "Do you hear me?" Luca blinked, confused. "Boss?" "Get a chair," Enzo commanded, pointing to his own VIP booth. "The velvet one. Bring it here, now." Luca hesitated, then grabbed the plush velvet armchair from the VIP section and dragged it to the center of the floor where Clara stood. "Sit," Enzo said to Clara. It wasn't an order anymore. It was a plea. "Please, sit down." Clara looked at the chair, then at Enzo. She didn't move. She just held her apron, her eyes cold. "I'm fine standing. I have tables to clear." "You are not clearing tables," Enzo said, running a hand through his hair. "Henderson." The manager popped up from behind the bar like a terrified gopher. "Yes, Mr. Moretti." "Get ice," Enzo barked. "The good ice, and a towel, a clean one, and bring a bottle of water. No, bring the Pellegrino. Right away." The room was spinning in confusion. Why was the wolf tending to the sheep? Enzo turned back to his men. "Lock the doors." "The cops?" Luca asked. "Forget the cops," Enzo hissed, grabbing Luca by the lapels of his jacket and pulling him close. "The cops are the least of our problems. We have a bigger problem. Alessandro Vitti is on a plane." Luca's face went slack. He was older than Enzo. He remembered the stories from the 90s. He knew the name. "The butcher, I thought he was retired. I thought he was in Sicily growing grapes." "He's coming here," Enzo whispered. "And that," he pointed a shaking finger at Clara, "that is his daughter." Luca looked at the waitress, the girl he had sneered at minutes ago, and the colour drained from his face. "We're dead! We are actually dead!" "Not if we fix this," Enzo said, though he didn't sound convinced. He turned back to Clara. Henderson arrived with a silver bucket of ice and a linen napkin. Enzo snatched it from him. He wrapped the ice carefully, approaching Clara, like one would approach a bomb that had already started ticking. "Here," Enzo said, holding out the ice pack. For your face." Clara took it. She didn't say thank you. She pressed the cold pack against her cheek and winced. "You have a heavy hand, Mr. Moretti." Enzo flinched. "Ms. Evans." "Clara." "Look, I didn't know. If I had known who you were, you wouldn't have hit me." Clara cut him off. "So it's okay to hit a waitress, but not a Don's daughter." "Is that how your honor works?" Enzo opened his mouth, but no words came out. She was right. He was a bully, and now the biggest bully on the planet was coming to collect. "My watch," Enzo said, desperation creeping into his voice. "We have to find the watch. If I find it, if I prove you didn't take it, maybe your father will listen to reason." Clara looked at him with pity. "My father doesn't listen to reason, Enzo. He listens to blood. But go ahead. Find your toy." Enzo spun around to the crowd. The club was full of New York's elite, but Enzo didn't care. "Nobody leaves," he roared. "Lights up, full brightness, turn the music off." The atmospheric lighting vanished, replaced by the harsh, ugly glare of the cleaning lights. The glamour of the club evaporated, leaving only nervous people in expensive clothes. "My watch was stolen," Enzo announced, walking into the center of the room. "A Patek Philippe, platinum. It went missing from table 4 in the last 30 minutes. I accused this woman." He gestured to Clara. "I was wrong. Someone else in this room has it." He scanned the crowd, his eyes manic. "I'm going to close my eyes for 10 seconds, Enzo lied. "If the watch is on the floor when I open them, everyone goes home alive. If it is not, my men will search every single person here. And if I find it on you..." He let the threat hang. The tension was palpable. Enzo counted. 1, 2, 3. He opened his eyes. The floor was empty. "Fine," Enzo growled. "Lockdown. Nobody moves. Luca, start with the staff. Strip the booth. Tear the cushions apart." The search was brutal. Enzo's men tore the Sapphire Lounge apart. Cushions were ripped open with knives. Vases were smashed to check the bottoms. Patrons were lined up against the wall, frisked by heavy-handed guards. Clara sat in the velvet chair, watching the chaos. She felt a strange dissociation. For 4 years she had been Clara the invisible waitress. Now she was Clara the Viti. The mask was off. She checked her phone. No messages. He was in the air. Enzo was sweating through his suit. Every minute that ticked by was a minute closer to his execution. "Nothing on the staff, boss," Luca reported, looking grim. "We checked the lockers, the trash cans, the vents. Clean." "It has to be here," Enzo paced. "I took it off. I put it on the ledger. I went to the bathroom. I came back. Gone." "Who was near the table?" Luca asked. "Just her." Enzo pointed at Clara. And Bianca." Enzo stopped. He froze in his tracks. Bianca. Bianca Miller was an aspiring model Enzo had been seeing for a few weeks. She was gorgeous, vapid, and expensive. She had been sitting in the booth with him. When he went to the bathroom, she had said she was going to the bar to get a different cocktail because the scotch was too smelly. Enzo turned his head slowly toward the corner of the room where the VIP guests were being held. Bianca was there, looking indignant, clutching her designer purse, a small silver clutch. She was tapping her foot, looking more annoyed than scared. Enzo walked toward her. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Enzo, baby," Bianca whined as he approached. "This is ridiculous. My feet hurt. Can you tell your gorillas to let me get an Uber? I have a casting in the morning." Enzo didn't smile. He stared at her. He remembered something now. Last week, Bianca had asked him for $5,000 for acting classes. He had said no. She had pouted for days. "Give me your bag, Bianca," Enzo said softly. Bianca blinked. Her artificial eyelashes fluttered. "What, don't be silly. You think I took your stupid watch? Give me the bag." "No." She pulled it back. "This is a Judith Lieber. You can't just—" Enzo didn't have time for chivalry. He snatched the clutch from her hands. "Hey!" she shrieked. "That's private." Enzo popped the clasp. He turned the bag upside down over a nearby table. Lipstick, a compact mirror, a tampon, a small bag of white powder, and then with a heavy thud, a platinum watch hit the table. The Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime. The room went silent again. Enzo stared at the watch, the object that had almost cost him his life, the object he had slapped Clara for. He looked up at Bianca. Her face had gone from annoyed to terrified in a heartbeat. "Enzo, I was just holding it for you. You left it on the table. I didn't want it to get stolen. I was going to give it back. You were going to give it back." Enzo repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. "You let me scream at her. You let me slap her. You watched me almost kill an innocent woman, and you stood there with this in your bag. I was scared," Bianca sobbed. "You were so angry." Enzo looked at the watch, then at Clara. Clara was watching them. She didn't look triumphant. She looked tired. She stood up slowly, clutching the ice pack to her face. Enzo walked over to her, the watch in his hand. He felt smaller than he ever had in his life. He held the watch out not to give it to her, but just to show her. "I found it," he whispered. It was my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, I assume," Clara said dryly. Enzo swallowed. "Clara, there are no words. I will pay you. Anything you want. $5 million. 10. I'll kill Bianca. I'll do whatever you want." Clara laughed a sad, broken sound. "You think money fixes this? You think killing that stupid girl fixes this?" She lowered the ice pack. The bruise was turning purple now, an ugly stain on her porcelain skin. "My father lands in less than an hour, Enzo. When he sees this bruise, he isn't going to ask for an explanation. He isn't going to ask who stole the watch. Please." Enzo fell to his knees. The Don of Midtown kneeling on the sticky floor of a nightclub in front of a waitress. "Help me. Call him back. Tell him it was a mistake. Tell him I fixed it." Clara looked down at him. She remembered how it felt when his hand connected with her face. She remembered the humiliation. "I can't stop him," Clara said softly. "Nobody can stop him." "But—" Enzo looked up, hope flaring in his eyes. But if you want to live," Clara said, "you better start praying. And you better get me a steak. Rare. I haven't eaten since lunch." Enzo scrambled up. "Steak chef, get the kitchen open. Make the best steak we have. Move." The kitchen staff, who had been peeking out the doors, scrambled into action. Enzo turned back to Clara, hovering like a nervous waiter. Is there anything else?" Clara looked at the door. The rain was pounding harder against the glass now. The storm was outside, but the hurricane was incoming. "Yes," Clara said. "Run." Enzo shook his head. "I can't run. If Vitti wants to find me, he will. My only chance is you." The mood in the club had shifted from fear to a strange, surreal purgatory. Patrons were still locked inside, drinking free champagne that Enzo had ordered to keep them calm. Bianca was being held in a back office, sobbing, and Clara sat in the VIP booth, eating a filet mignon that cost $200, while the man who ran the city watched her chew, checking his Rolex every 30 seconds, waiting for the Reaper. 40 minutes later, the phone in the manager's office rang. It wasn't the burner phone. It was the landline. Henderson answered it. He listened for a second, then turned pale. He held the phone out to Enzo. It's the airport tower," Henderson whispered. "A private Gulfstream just touched down at Teterboro. Tail number SI 1990. Enzo felt his stomach drop. SI. Sicily. "He's here," Enzo whispered. The doors to the Sapphire Lounge rattled as the wind picked up outside. Or maybe it wasn't the wind. Clara wiped her mouth with a linen napkin. She stood up. "Clean me up, Enzo," she said. "If I look like a victim, you die. If I look like a queen, maybe you just lose a hand." The rain outside the Sapphire Lounge had turned into a deluge. Thunder rattled the expensive plate glass windows, sounding like distant artillery. Inside the club was a tomb. The music was gone. The chatter was gone. The patrons were huddled near the walls, realizing that being wealthy didn't make them bulletproof. Enzo stood near the entrance, his hands clasped in front of him. He had straightened his tie. He had wiped the sweat from his brow. He was ready to die with dignity. Clara sat in the velvet booth, her back straight. Makeup artists pulled from the terrified patrons had tried to cover the bruise, but the swelling was undeniable. It was a dark violet mark on her cheek, a billboard advertising Enzo's mistake. At 10:45 p.m., headlights cut through the gloom outside. Not one car, not two. A convoy of 6 black Cadillac Escalades screeched to a halt in front of the club, blocking the entire street. "He's here," Luca whispered, his voice trembling. The doors of the SUVs opened in unison. 24 men poured out. These weren't the flashy, steroid-pumped bodyguards Enzo employed. These men were older. They wore raincoats and fedoras. They moved with a terrifying synchronized efficiency. They carried umbrellas not for themselves, but to form a canopy leading to the club entrance. From the center vehicle, an old man stepped out. Alessandro Vitti. He was smaller than Enzo expected. He wore a heavy wool overcoat and leaned on a cane with a silver handle shaped like a lion's head. He had silver hair swept back and a neatly trimmed grey beard. He looked like a grandfather, a distinguished professor, or a retired banker. Except for his eyes. Even from across the street, Enzo could feel them. They were black holes, void of any light or warmth. The doors to the Sapphire Lounge swung open. The wind howled into the lobby, bringing the smell of rain and ozone. Vitti walked in. His cane clicked rhythmically on the marble floor. Click, step, click, step. He didn't look at Enzo. He didn't look at the trembling manager. He didn't look at the patrons cowering in the corners. He walked straight to the VIP booth. Clara stood up. The room held its breath. Vitti stopped 3 feet from her. He looked at her face. His eyes traced her jawline, her eyes, and finally they landed on the bruise. He stared at it for a long time. The silence was so loud it was physically painful. He slowly raised a gloved hand and gently, agonizingly, gently touched her cheek. "Does it hurt, Piccola?" he asked. His voice was soft, rough, like sandpaper on silk. Clara leaned into his hand, her eyes closing. A single tear escaped. "It throbs, Papa." Vitti nodded slowly. He took off his glove. He wiped the tear from her face with his thumb. "I missed you," he whispered. 4 years. I have not slept for 4 years." "I needed to be free, Papa," Clara said. "And look what freedom brought you." Vitti said, his voice hardening slightly as he gestured to the room. "Waiting on trash, served by animals, beaten like a dog." He turned around. The transition was instantaneous. The loving father vanished. The butcher appeared. He looked at Enzo. Enzo felt his knees want to buckle, but he forced them to lock. He stepped forward. "Mr. Vitti," Enzo said, bowing his head slightly. "I am Vincenzo Moretti. This is my establishment." Vitti didn't speak. He walked toward Enzo. He stopped until he was inches away. Vitti was 5 inches shorter than Enzo, but he seemed to tower over him. "You have a strong hand, Vincenzo," Vitti said conversationally. "To leave a mark like that on a Vitti, you must have hit her with everything you had." "It was a mistake," Enzo said, his voice steady. "I believed a theft had occurred. I acted without honor. I accept full responsibility." Responsibility. Vitti tasted the word. Americans love that word. You think saying it fixes things. In Sicily, we do not have responsibility. We have consequence. Vitti turned to his men. "Bring me a chair." One of the Sicilians grabbed a chair and placed it in the center of the room. Vitti sat down, resting his hands on his cane. "Bring me the thief," Vitti commanded. Enzo nodded to Luca. Luca dragged Bianca out of the back office. She was a mess, mascara running down her face, hyperventilating. "No, please!" Bianca screamed. I didn't know who she was." Luca threw Bianca onto the floor in front of Vitti. Vitti looked at her with mild disinterest, as if she were a cockroach. "You stole the watch." Yes, I took it," Bianca sobbed, crawling toward Vitti's polished shoes. "I'm sorry, I'll give it back. I'll do anything." Vitti looked at Enzo. "This is the woman you chose over my daughter. This screeching creature. You hit my blood. For her. I didn't know it was her," Enzo said again. "I thought Clara was the thief." "And that makes it okay." Vitti's voice dropped. "If she was just a waitress, just a nobody, it is okay to smash her face because you lost a trinket." Enzo swallowed. "In my world, yes. Thieves are punished." Vitti laughed. It was a dry, terrifying sound. "Your world is a sandbox, boy. You play gangster. You wear the suits. You buy the guns. But you do not know respect." Vitti motioned to his men. 2 of them stepped forward and grabbed Bianca. "Get her out of my sight," Vitti said. "She is boring me." "What are you going to do?" Bianca shrieked as they dragged her toward the exit. "Enzo, help me!" Enzo didn't move. He knew he couldn't save her. He couldn't even save himself. The doors closed behind Bianca's screams. Vitti turned his attention back to Enzo. "Now," Vitti said, pulling a gun from inside his coat. It was an old revolver, heavy and black. He placed it on the table next to him. "We discussed the price of a Vitti's blood." The revolver sat on the table like a judge's gavel. "Kneel," Vitti said. Enzo hesitated for a fraction of a second, his pride flaring up. But he looked at the 24 men surrounding him, with submachine guns hidden under their coats. He looked at Clara, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. Enzo sank to his knees on the hard floor. "You insulted my family," Vitti said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "In the old days I would cut off your hand. The hand that struck her." Vitti picked up the revolver. He spun the cylinder. Click, whir. "But I am old, and I am tired of funerals," Vitti sighed. "And my daughter. She seems to have chosen this city. She ran away from my protection." Vitti stood up and walked around Enzo, circling him like a shark. "You run mid-town, yes?" Vitti asked. "Yes," Enzo said, staring at the floor. "And you have money?" "Power, yes." "But you are stupid," Vitti concluded. "You are impulsive. You have a temper. A man who cannot control his temper cannot control his empire. You are a child with a loaded gun." Vitti stopped in front of Enzo. He pressed the cold barrel of the revolver against Enzo's forehead. Enzo closed his eyes. This was it, the end of the Moretti line. "Daddy, stop!" The voice cut through the tension. Clara walked forward. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked annoyed. "Clara," Vitti warned, keeping the gun pressed to Enzo's head. "Do not interfere. This is business." "This isn't business," Clara said, stepping between the gun and Enzo. She pushed the barrel away with her hand. The room gasped. "This is my life." Vitti looked at his daughter. "He hurt you. And he is pathetic," Clara said, looking down at Enzo. "Look at him, kneeling, terrified. If you kill him, what do I get? A corpse, more nightmares, more running." "What do you want, Tesoro?" Vitti asked, lowering the gun slightly. Clara looked at Enzo. Her blue eyes were cold, calculating. She had grown up in a Mafia household. She knew how the game was played. Killing Enzo was easy. Using him was smart. "I'm tired of running Papa," Clara said. "I'm tired of hiding in roach motels. I'm tired of being a waitress. I want to stay in New York, but I need to be safe." "I will leave my men," Vitti said. "They will protect you." "Your men stand out." Clara shook her head. "They smell like Sicily. The cops will be on them in a week. I need someone local, someone who owns the police, someone who runs the city." She pointed at Enzo. "I want him." Enzo's eyes snapped open. He looked up at Clara. "What?" Vitti frowned. "Him. The dog who bit you. He owes me," Clara said. "A life debt. You were going to take his life, right?" "Yes." "Then his life belongs to you. Give it to me." Vitti stroked his beard, considering this. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "I see. You want a pet." "I want a guarantee," Clara corrected. "I want the Moretti Empire to work for me. I want his protection. I want his resources. And I want him to know every single day that he is alive only because I allow it." Vitti chuckled. It was a dark, rumbling sound. "You really are my daughter." Vitti holstered the gun. He looked at Enzo. "Get up then," Vitti barked. Enzo stood up slowly, his legs stiff. He looked from Vitti to Clara, confusion warring with relief. "You heard her," Vitti said. "I was going to kill you. I was going to burn your club and salt the earth. But she has asked for mercy." Vitti stepped close to Enzo, grabbing his chin with a grip of iron. "Listen to me, boy. From this moment on, you are not the Don of Midtown. You are her servant. You are her shield. You are her shadow. If she trips, you catch her. If she is cold, you burn yourself to keep her warm. If she bleeds—" Vitti's eyes flashed. "If she bleeds, you die." Slowly. I understand," Enzo whispered. "No, you don't," Vitti said. "But you will." Vitti turned to the room. "The debt is settled for now." He turned back to Clara and kissed her on the forehead, the unbruised side. "I must go, Tesoro. The feds will be tracking my plane. I cannot stay in American airspace for more than 2 hours. "Thank you, Papa," Clara whispered. "I will be watching," Vitti warned Enzo one last time. "One phone call from her, just one, and I come back, and next time I bring the fire." With a swirl of his coat, Alessandro Vitti turned and marched out. The army of Sicilian men followed him. The doors swung shut. The SUVs roared to life and sped away into the rainy night. The silence returned to the Sapphire Lounge. Enzo stood there alive, but stripped of his dignity. He looked at Clara. Clara walked over to the table where the stolen watch, the Patek Philippe, was still sitting. She picked it up. She looked at it, then tossed it to Enzo. He caught it reflexively. "Put it on," she said. Enzo strapped the watch to his wrist. His hands were shaking slightly. "Now," Clara said, sitting back down in the VIP booth and crossing her legs. She looked like a queen addressing a peasant. "I believe I ordered dessert before all this happened. And Enzo." Enzo straightened up. "Yes," Clara pointed to her bruised cheek. "This hurts. Get me more ice. And then we need to discuss my new living arrangements. My apartment in Queens is a dump, and since I own you now, I assume I'll be moving into your penthouse." Enzo stared at her. The shy waitress was gone. In her place was a woman who had just negotiated a life debt with the devil. And God help him, he had never seen anything more beautiful or terrifying. "Yes, Clara," Enzo said softly. "Right away." The drive to Enzo's penthouse was silent. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Manhattan glistening like oil. Enzo drove his Aston Martin, not his chauffeur. He felt he needed to do this himself. Clara sat in the passenger seat, watching the city blur by. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She glanced at Enzo. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and wasn't sure if he was still burning. They arrived at the Obsidian Tower, a glass needle piercing the midtown skyline. Enzo guided her through the private entrance past the doorman, who looked confused to see the boss carrying a waitress's beat-up backpack. The penthouse was exactly what Clara expected, cold, modern, and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. It screamed lonely power. "The guest suite is down the hall," Enzo said, his voice low. "It has its own bathroom. I'll have fresh linens brought up." Clara walked to the window, looking out at the hangar she had been serving drinks in just hours ago. "No." Enzo paused. "No. I'll take the master bedroom," Clara said, turning to face him. "You can take the guest suite." Enzo blinked. It was a petty power move, and they both knew it. But he nodded. "As you wish." And Enzo. "Yes." "I'm not your prisoner," she said softly. "And I'm not your boss. I don't know what we are. But thank you for not letting him kill Bianca, even after what she did." Enzo looked down, shame coloring his features. "She didn't deserve to die. And you didn't deserve to be hit. He walked over to a wet bar and poured a glass of water, handing it to her. His fingers brushed hers. The electricity was undeniable. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something heavier. "I will never forgive myself for that," Enzo whispered, looking at the bruise on her cheek. "Every time I look at you, I will see my own failure." Clara took the water. "Good. Keep seeing it. It will keep you sharp." 2 weeks later. The dynamic in the New York underworld had shifted. Rumors were flying. They said Vincenzo Moretti had been compromised. They said he was answering to a higher power. They were half right. Clara didn't just live in the penthouse. She thrived there. She had traded her apron for silk blouses and tailored blazers. She didn't get involved in the drug trade or the gambling rings. She wanted no part of the dirty business, but she managed the legitimate side, the clubs, the restaurants, the real estate. And Enzo was her shadow. He accompanied her everywhere. When she walked into a room, he was a step behind. He opened doors. He pulled out chairs. He glared at anyone who looked at her for too long. It was a Tuesday night at Le Cercle, a high-stakes poker room Enzo owned. A rival boss from New Jersey, Tony the Jaw Russo, was visiting. Tony was loud, obnoxious, and drunk. He saw Clara checking the ledgers at the bar. "Hey, sweetheart," Tony yelled, snapping his fingers. "Get me a bourbon. Neat." The room went quiet. Everyone knew who Clara was now. Everyone except Tony. Clara didn't look up from the ledger. "I don't work here, Tony. Ask the bartender." Tony stood up, his face flushing red. He walked over and slammed his hand on the ledger. "I said get me a drink. I don't care who you're sleeping with. When a made man asks for a drink, you jump." He reached out to grab her arm. Before his fingers could graze her silk sleeve, a hand clamped onto his wrist. It wasn't Clara's. It was Enzo. Enzo didn't look angry. He looked bored. But his grip was crushing the bones in Tony's wrist. "Enzo," Tony yelped. "Tell your girl to learn some manners." "She isn't my girl," Enzo said calmly, tightening his grip until a sickening crack echoed through the room. Tony screamed, dropping to his knees. "She is my queen," Enzo whispered into Tony's ear. "And you just tried to touch the crown." Enzo shoved Tony backward. "Get out. If you ever come back to my city, you won't leave walking." Tony scrambled out, clutching his broken wrist. Clara watched the scene calmly. She closed the ledger. She looked at Enzo. For the first time in 2 weeks, she didn't see the man who slapped her. She saw the man who would burn the world to make sure she never felt pain again. Later that night on the balcony of the penthouse, the air was cool. Enzo was smoking a cigarette, looking at the lights. Clara walked out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You broke his wrist," Clara said. "He touched you," Enzo replied simply. "You didn't have to do that. I can handle myself." "I know." Enzo turned to her. He flicked the cigarette away. "That's what scares me. You don't need me, Clara. Your father's name protects you. Your own strength protects you. I am unnecessary." Clara stepped closer. The wind whipped her hair across her face. "Is that what you think? That I keep you around because of a debt?" "Why else?" Enzo laughed bitterly. "I humiliated you. I hurt you. I am a monster, Clara." "You were a monster," Clara corrected. She reached out and took his hand, the same hand that had struck her, the same hand that had broken Tony's wrist. She placed it on her cheek, right over the spot where the bruise had finally faded. Enzo flinched, trying to pull away, but she held him there. You were a monster because you thought power was about fear, Clara whispered. But for the last 2 weeks, you haven't ruled with fear. You've ruled with loyalty. You've served me not because you're scared of my father, but because... She let the sentence hang. Enzo looked into her ice-blue eyes. The wall he had built around his heart crumbled. Because I worship you. Enzo finished, his voice breaking. I don't serve you to save my life, Clara. I serve you because my life is empty without you in it. Clara smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had given him. Finally, the truth. She leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was a claim. It was the waitress claiming the boss. It was the prey devouring the predator. Enzo froze for a second. Then he wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him, burying his face in her neck. He held her, like she was the only solid thing in a world of chaos. The phone in Enzo's pocket buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Reluctantly, Enzo pulled back. He checked the screen. Unknown number. He answered it, putting it on speaker so Clara could hear. Hello. The wrist. A gravelly voice came through the speaker. Tony Russo's wrist. It was a clean break. Good form. Enzo went rigid. Clara laughed softly. Hello, Daddy, she said. I see you are keeping your pet well trained, Alessandro Vitti said. I have ears everywhere, Tesoro, even in the poker rooms. He's learning, Clara said, looking at Enzo with warmth in her eyes. Good, Vitti grunted. Keep him close. The winter is coming, and it is cold in New York. You will need the fire. I have the fire, Papa, Clara said. I'm looking right at him. Then I will stay in Sicily, Vitti said. For now. The line went dead. Enzo looked at the phone, then at Clara. He let out a long breath he felt he had been holding for weeks. He's never going to stop watching, is he? Enzo asked. Never, Clara said, taking his hand and leading him back inside the warm penthouse. But that's okay. Let him watch. Let him see that the Wolf of Midtown belongs to me. Enzo smiled, closing the balcony door behind them, shutting out the city, the noise and the danger. Yours, Enzo vowed, always. And that is the story of how a shy waitress brought the King of New York to his knees, not with a weapon, but with a single phone call. It's a reminder that in the world of power, nothing is what it seems. The person pouring your coffee might just be the daughter of the devil himself. Enzo Moretti learned the hard way that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about who you're willing to protect. He started as the villain of his own story, but in the end, he became the guardian of hers. What did you think of Enzo's redemption? Did he deserve a second chance, or should Alessandro Vitti have finished the job? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of drama romance and mafia justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell icon so you never miss a story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a billionaire who fakes his bankruptcy to test his fiancée. You won't want to miss that. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay safe.